Couple things I need to read. When we present items tonight for those in the room and for those watching at home, all matters requiring commission action will be presented to the commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where the staff is the applicant, obviously there will only be one presentation. City staff will always make the first presentation. The applicant will make the second presentation. Both presentations we're going to try to limit to 5 minutes apiece. And then we will open the public hearing for those that are physically present, wishing to speak about an item. Those in favor of an item will be heard, and then followed by those opposed. 10-minute time limit will allow for the public comment in favor of an item, 10 minutes also for those opposed. A staff member will track the 10-minute time limit. Ms. Painter, is that you tonight? Okay. We'll track the 10-minute periods and notify the speaker the 5-minute mark, 1-minute mark, and then call when time expires. The chair, in their discretion, may extend these time periods. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint one spokesperson, just in the essence of time, to present their concerns or point of view to the commission on each item. The public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via web-based form located on Wilmington website. All comments received prior to 3 p.m. today were forwarded. We have not received any, so I assume the answer is none. Okay. Unedited to the commission, so all comments received would be delivered to City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. All votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements are read into the record. The chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. If there is an appeal required, rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the City Council. Appeals should be in the form of a letter submitted to the City Clerk within 10 days of this hearing. Any items appealed will be tentatively heard by City Council on January 23rd. Okay. With that, I will move on, and the first item of business will be the approval of the minutes from the October 4th meeting, because we did not have a November meeting. Any need to discuss the minutes, or is there do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second. I have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition, so the minutes are approved. And let us then move on to new business. The first item tonight is, I'm going to struggle reading this. I just had cataract surgery, so playing the trombone a little bit here. It's the property containing 1.79 acres on a parcel located at 1618 Dawson Street from UMX Urban Mixed Use District to CBCD Community Business Conditional District for a general retail use with associated fuel pumps. Presenting this and previewing this item tonight for the commission is Brian Chambers, Assistant Planning Director.
Good evening, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. This site is located on the south side of Dawson Street between 16th and 17th. It's approximately 1.8 acres in size, and it currently includes a vacant commercial structure, which I believe was the old Rite Aid store. This map shows the site within the surrounding area, and on the right of the screen will be a couple of photos of the subject property. Here's some photos of the subject site from the surrounding roadways, 16th and 17th Street, and then looking west on Dawson. And then here's several photos of the surrounding properties. The site is located in an area that is currently zoned UMX, Urban Mixed Use. The commercial zoning is located to the east along Dawson Street. There is an existing gas station located to the north across Dawson. There are offices located to the west across 16th Street, and then commercial uses are located to the south and east. Again, the applicant is proposing to rezone this site from the UMX zoning to a commercial community business conditional district for general retail use with accessory fuel pumps. This is the proposed site plan provided by the applicant. The project includes a one-story, 5,200 square foot structure and a fuel canopy with 14 fuel pumps. Access to the site will be provided by 2 existing driveways on South 16th Street and South 17th Street. And there are also proposed 2 new driveways along Dawson Street. One would be a right-in only drive and the other would be a right-out only drive. The city's Design and Adjustment Committee granted waivers for the location of both the existing and proposed driveways. Traffic data indicates that there will be an increase in estimated vehicle trips associated with this use. The requirement for a traffic impact analysis was waived due to the high percentage of trips that would be considered pass-by and would actually reduce the overall impact on the adjacent roadways. And the proposal would result in a net reduction in impervious surface coverage. These are the elevations that were provided by the applicant. The Board of Adjustment granted variances from the frontage standards for these building elevations. One was for the location of the primary entrance, and one was for the percentage of window and door fenestration on the street-facing facades. And these elevations represent what the board approved. They were updated since that meeting. The site is located within an urban mixed-use center. An inner-city revitalization area of opportunity as identified in our comprehensive plan growth strategies map. The comprehensive plan calls for infill development that maintains and enhances the desired character. The plan supports infill that improves the existing physical development pattern, and the plan supports building and site designs that provide for more urban conditions and foster safe pedestrian activity. This proposed rezoning allows for compatible development. The proposed redevelopment would remove a blighted vacant building and provide needed investment along one of our important commercial corridors. The proposal includes a site-specific development plan and building elevations that ensure an improved urban form and increased vehicular and pedestrian safety. Staff believes this request is consistent with our comprehensive plan and is recommending conditional approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and the applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Lennon?
Brian, can you just, for the benefit of people listening, explain the concept of pass-by trips?
Correct. The pass-by trips are basically, this is not a destination. This is more of, if you're going to get fuel, you generally stop to get fuel on whatever destination it's on the way to. So all the trips, most of the trips that would be visiting this would be already going by it. So it would be captured by these pass-by trips.
So said another way, the traffic's already accounted for because it's
Right.
on one of those 3 major arteries.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Brian, thanks. And
Thank you.
could we now hear from the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Amy Schaefer. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. I'm here with the entire development team. So if you have any technical questions, we have the appropriate people here to answer those for you. I want to thank Mr. Chambers for the staff report and his presentation. A lot of mine is duplicative, so in the interest of the 5-minute time limit, I'll kind of go through those slides pretty quickly, but please stop if you have any questions. So again, the location of the property, it's a uniquely situated property on 3 major roads. That indicated a need for the Design Adjustment Committee due to the requirements of the city, but as Mr. Chambers said, all of those approvals have been made, and all of the site plans you're going to see tonight comply with both the Board of Adjustment waivers and variances and the Design Adjustment Committee standards that were approved. Again, it's zoned UMX, and we're asking for a conditional district for community business. This is the existing site. It is in no way, shape, or form compliant with the current land use development patterns in that area or the comprehensive plan desires for that area. And so with that in mind, we are anticipating demolishing the existing structure. So one of the modest non-support was, utilizing existing buildings. In this instance, that goes against the comprehensive plan, so we are not doing that. As you can see, again, it's setbacks and the fenestrations aren't compliant. In addition, the surrounding infrastructure is kind of out of date. Those sidewalks, I don't know if you can tell, they're overgrown, they're covered in debris and sand, and so, of course, this development will improve all of those up to code and then continue to maintain the area around the property. And again, just some additional views of the current conditions. And this is the illustration of the updated site plan with the fenestration that complies with the Land Development Code. And the site plan, in Mr. Chambers' staff report, he noted that we were not compliant with the parking. That was just a leftover from the various design approvals. So the site plan that you'll see with you today and that we've provided to the city is compliant with the parking standards and does provide the bicycle parking as well. One of the other questions, concerns, comments in the staff report was interconnectivity between the adjacent lots. The adjacent property to the south of us has been recently updated and developed, and so any cross-parking or connection to their parking lot is going to take away a lot of that parking. It's a very small site, and so we would ask that that be worked out through TRC if it's possible, but I don't think so with the building and the stormwater pond where they are right now. So this is just, some of the variances that we requested. And again, that stormwater pond that I spoke of, as you can see, it takes up a fairly large section of the property, and that will be improved up to current code conditions with a 10% reduction in impervious surface on the overall lot. Again, just some more of the elevations to show you what the building is intended to look like from all sides, addressing the 3 major roadways. These are the requirements for a conditional district rezoning request. And as I stated, the building is not currently compliant. While this property is zoned UMX, the adjacent properties really haven't been developed under that code, so it's difficult to integrate into those neighboring parcels. And the rezoning would allow a revitalization within the new DO and to update that area. Again, just more of the same. In addition, there were some concerns about the neighbors about the current vacant property. We will have lighting 24 hours. There will be somebody on site to monitor that, to maintain the property. And so I think that made the neighbors feel a little bit more comfortable about the future conditions of the property. So again, one of the things, I don't see anybody here tonight, but at Design Adjustment and Board of Adjustment, the neighbors actually came out and spoke in support of this, and I think you can see that as well from our community meeting. They see this as a benefit to the area, just as the staff does. So we would ask for your recommendation of approval, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Amy, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Woodruff?
Amy, just real quick, what's the anticipated operating hours?
24 hours, yes, sir.
Commissioner Lennon?
You mentioned the neighbors. Were those other business owners?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. I believe we've had people from the property to the south, somebody from David and Associates, and other property owner businesses around there.
Because I'm thinking the closest residential is a couple blocks.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
To the west, I think there's a couple blocks to the west, there are some residential areas. But as Mr. Chambers said, a lot of this is going to be drive-by, people getting to and from work. There's really not a lot of residential close by.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Adams, anything? Commissioner Goins? Commissioner Kofer? Okay, Amy, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I will open the public hearing. If there is anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. If If there's anyone wishing to speak against, please come forward. If there's anyone wishing to speak at all, please come forward. Seeing negative answers to all three, I will close the public hearing. And what are the wishes of the commission?
I do have one question, Mr. Chair. Just through some of the LDC workshop meeting we had that talked about these fuel canopies becoming internal to the site, I can see that this applicant has achieved that. Is that, and this is really probably a question for the board or Mr. Chambers, is that something that's now that did get approved, Brian, from when we were working on that before?
The fuel canopy amendment was approved by City Council, so it's not a requirement on a non-frontage standard road. The frontage standards still do require that the building designs meet the frontage standard requirements, but the fuel canopy amendment was approved.
Thank you. And in regards to making a motion as written with these conditions, there's something in there regarding that Amy mentioned about the bicycle spaces are now included. And so that doesn't need to be called out here, I suppose, if a motion is made. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I was going to make a motion, but I'm sorry. What did you say about bicycles?
Oh, sorry. I was just curious if there needed to be an additional condition about the bicycle. There's a mention about bicycle spaces or a rack, but it sounds like they've taken care of that.
Well, let me try and sum it. I think the packet we got had a set of statements and conditions around bicycles and parking that would have needed to be addressed. I believe what was stated tonight is what we have been shown is a site plan that actually addresses those. Do I understand that correctly, Brian?
Yes, staff received an updated site plan that is now compliant with both parking and bicycle parking. The conditions included in the report that will ultimately be forwarded to council just show compliance with the site plan as presented.
Does that answer your question?
It does. That's what I was curious about there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because it's conditional on site plan approval and those elements are in the site plan,
Those two aspects of the site plan will be required through technical review regardless.
all that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I move approval of agenda item number 1, the rezoning of 1618 Dawson Street from UMX to CB Conditional District. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and the Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposed rezoning would allow for the redevelopment of a vacant property along a heavily traveled commercial corridor and provide compatible infill development that includes an improved urban form and increased vehicular and pedestrian safety.
Commissioner Lennon, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to finish, I think, my thoughts on, sorry.
Sorry.
Do you mind tabling that motion for a second?
As long as the,
Sure,
okay.
absolutely.
So go ahead, motion's off the table.
I did just want to share my thoughts on this. I do understand the importance of providing services in the community, and obviously this is an important community service. And I do appreciate that the applicant has gone through some extra steps to try to address architectural concerns with going through the Board of Appeals and looking at some variances. But I can't support this project as currently proposed, and there's some pretty important reasons for that, in my opinion. I think staff report talked about the site is abandoned, and I think that redeveloping something as a short-term solution just to deal with an abandoned building at the expense of the long-term potential of a site is not something that I agree with and am comfortable with. I also read that the staff report talked about the challenges of infill and mixed use in some of these sites. I mean, the UMX zoning is here in this place, in my opinion, to promote redevelopment, infill, that have a mix of uses. An important component of that is bedrooms. I mean, we need these types of housing that we've seen done 2 and 3 blocks from here. The Pearl has been one, the project that was built next to the ABC store at Castle and 17th. There are examples of how this can be done. So I fundamentally kind of challenge the notion that this is a site that may or may not be able to support, you know, redevelopment like that. You know, as an architect, I also just have issues with a fundamental suburban model plopped into an urban grid. I just don't think that this is what, on prominent sites, I understand there's a lot of traffic, but it's not doing what I feel like a site and a building should do in a location like this. And lastly, I do understand the idea of the pass-through traffic, but as someone who drives by this site at least 2 times a day and sometimes more, the in and out at certain times in those levels of intersection that are already services E and F, I don't think that's acceptable. So I just wanted everyone to know that this is a project that I cannot support as currently proposed.
Any other dialogue from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Adams, are there any questions that you have for the applicant or the staff before we conclude? So you're good? Okay. All right.
Give me just a second to process that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Need to look at one thing real quick. I can't find it, but could somebody tell me what the zone was prior to UMX?
We don't have that information, but generally, if it was zoned UMX, a part of that earlier, I think it was 2009 citywide rezoning, it was probably like a CS, commercial services use, at that location.
For some reason, I thought in the packet it has a little history of how that UMX got thrown out in the corporate limits.
I believe you're referring to language that starts at the bottom of page 7 and ends at the top of page 8, which indicates that the UMX was established in 2013 for the
Yes.
district, March 5th, 2013.
Hear you. Okay.
The UMX was established March 5th, 2013, and that's at the bottom of page 7, top of page 8.
Thank you, Ms. Painter. And that was just some of my curiosity, is what was it before UMX got, you know, scattered through this area? And I certainly appreciate Commissioner Adams' comments that it's a special site. It's because this UMX was overlaid on that site without the property owner's, you know, probably permission at that time or request. I'm subject to just go back to what it was prior to. It's kind of hard to say when you find a site and you really want to dictate what they can and can't do on it. I know that with a conditional rezoning, that's part of our job, but it's hard for me personally to say no on this one. So that's my thoughts just for the board.
If I could just chime in on that a little bit. Go ahead. That 2009 date that I threw out, that was the date that the South Side Small Area Plan was adopted, so I apologize for that mistake, but it came out of that planning process. And there were some 600 properties in the 45 corporate limits that were zoned from a previous zoning that was inappropriate for an urban form. There'd be a CS, commercial services, or light industrial, that type of thing. And all those property owners were notified and had the opportunity to opt out of that. So they were notified, and it wasn't forced upon them. I don't want there to be any thought on that, but if you look around that property, the zoning to the west, which is CSCB, that's typically what was located in that area, and we were trying to encourage redevelopment, so the UMX was put in place to provide that flexibility.
Question for the applicant. So the reason, real quick, Amy, is that the request for the rezoning is basically around the pumps? Is that really the thing that's driving this?
Yes, sir.
I mean, if that was not an issue, we would not be here.
So UMX does call for, they ask for mixed use, but it's not a requirement. And so, yes, the pumps, I believe, and I don't want to misspeak because it's been a while since we've been working on this, but I do believe the convenience store would be a permitted use in UMX. It's just the accessory use. And so the building would then become more in compliance with the UMX standards.
Okay. Commissioner Woodruff.
I'm just ready to second the motion.
Well, he's got to remake the motion because we withdrew it.
I don't know that he withdrew it. We just kind of opened up for discussion, but I'll do whatever you want.
That's okay. You want to just restate for anybody else? And just restate for the record, please.
Well, now I got to say something.
Okay, well, that's fine.
No, I appreciate those comments, and I apologize. I didn't realize that you wanted to speak, and I think everybody knows where I stand on the provision of additional housing, but one of the reasons I asked Ms. Schaefer the question was because I don't know that residential would work plopped down in the middle of this heavily commercial zoned area. And so, with respect, I think the Pearl is a different animal because there is residential around it, and there's not here. So to me, that's the other reason I asked about the pass-by trips, because there is so much traffic there, and arguably them stopping here may prevent them from stopping somewhere else. So I'm prepared to remake the motion on that.
Make sure, any other comments? Okay. You would do it again, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to move approval of agenda item number 1, the rezoning of 1618 Dawson Street from UMX to CB Conditional District. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposed rezoning would allow for the redevelopment of a vacant property along a heavily traveled commercial corridor and provide compatible infill development that includes an improved urban form and increased vehicular and pedestrian safety. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Motion's been made to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Woodruff has voted to second. Let me take the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Vote is, what do we have here tonight? 6? 5 to 1, approved. I know, I don't 1, 2, 3, yeah. 5 to 1 approved, so motion passes. Second item tonight is, let me find my agenda here, is an LDC amendment to amend the City Code, Chapter 18, to define and exempt bona fide farms in excess of 10 acres from certain zoning and permitting requirements. To present to the Commission will be Catherine Thurston, the zoning administrator.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. This request is an applicant-initiated code amendment that would modify the Land Development Code pertaining to bona fide farms to exempt such qualifying uses from certain land use and permitting requirements. If approved, bona fide farm uses over 10 acres would not be required to obtain building permits, comply with floodplain development standards, obtain permits for temporary uses such as festivals, concerts, or other entertainment events, or obtain permits to remove trees that would otherwise be protected. Bona fide farms would still be subject to stormwater control requirements, conservation resource regulations, signage standards, and permitting requirements for uses and structures that are not associated with the farm use. The full amendment is included in your case summary. It's in very fine print, so don't strain your eyes, Commissioner Pollock. Qualification as a bona fide farm is generally consistent with statutory requirements for those exemptions. There are currently a few large-scale farming uses within the city limits. That includes Canterbury Stables on Wrightsville Avenue and Oak Point Farms on Airlie Road. They would both be impacted by the proposed amendment. These non-conforming uses predate the adoption of the new code, and they're allowed to continue operations pursuant to City Code Article 7, which governs non-conforming uses. Staff believes that the proposed changes to the Land Development Code are consistent with, there were more photos, are consistent with the policies outlined in the CREATE Comprehensive Plan, including those encouraging the protection of unique environmental and natural resources and promoting such areas as economic and cultural assets. Staff believes the proposal is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends approval of this request. The applicant, represented by Attorney Schaefer, is also present to give a presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have of staff, though.
Catherine, I do have a question. Can you go back to I think it's your first chart where you said this is what they would not, this is what they will be able to, yeah, right there. So it says they would be exempt from permitting requirements including, and I go down to tree removal. Does that include any tree?
They would not be required to obtain tree removal permits for any trees.
So whether it's a specimen tree or any kind of a tree that's protected,
That's correct.
they would be excluded from that.
Right.
Okay, that's the only question I have right now. And Commissioner Woodruff?
My confusion, I'm looking at the application in the name of Wrightsville Farm and Equine LLC. Who is making the application? Is it one of these stables?
It's Canterbury Stables located at 6201 Wrightsville Avenue. So yes, it is.
So it's the Cardinal, or not Cardinal, whatever the other one was. I see it all the time. But I know which one you're talking about, okay. And is it part of your work to know, I mean, why are they doing this? What is it that they can't do?
The applicant, I believe, would be here to, or be better to address the motivation behind the amendment.
That's fine, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
Can you skip ahead or back to the slide that talked about building permitting? Obviously, someone that deals with a lot of building permits here, being that's handled by New Hanover County and not the city, I'm confused how city regulations could, I guess, exempt or be in conflict with the AHJ, the New Hanover County, which currently administers building permits. Can you explain that to me better?
New Hanover County still defers to the city to enforce any zoning requirements such as setbacks, heights, number of buildings, placement, that sort of thing. New Hanover County also has exemptions for bona fide farms, except as they pertain to floodplain development.
So would this put this more in line with the county's current guidelines around bona fide farms?
It's not in conflict with their requirements.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the idea of not having to issue for a building permit, but I'm trying to understand how that works because, and maybe Amy can talk more about that. Okay, thanks.
I thought there was something in the package that inferred that this would bring the city in line with the county so that there would be consistency up and down. Did I read that in my sleep, or is that?
No, the county does exempt bona fide farms from building permits except whenever those buildings are in a floodplain.
So that is, okay.
Mr. Chair
Yes.
and Ms. Thurston, do y'all mind if I interject for just 2 seconds? Ms. Thurston's correct. By state law, the county for bona fide farms is prohibited from requiring building permitting for bona fide farm use. It's under 160D 903, and I think Amy will probably elaborate on this a little bit when she gives her presentation. But part of the purpose of this was just to bring the city in line with that standard. It created a little bit of a conundrum because if a bona fide farm in the county, they would not have a building permit requirement for farm uses. But one in the city, technically, as it is right now, would fall under city zoning and would have to go through that process. And like you were saying, they would go through the county because the county does the building permitting, so it kind of created a conundrum. But the county is prohibited by 160D 903 from requiring permitting for bona fide farm purposes. Now, if they're doing something beyond that, like Lewis Farms is a good example, like, actually, that's more in the stormwater context, but I think they had to get a permit for the stuff in the front because it fell outside of the bona fide farm purposes, because they opened a store and things along those lines. So it's not a complete block of it, but for barn, shed, stuff like that, they wouldn't need to get building permits. I went farther into it than I planned on it, but I hope that somewhat answered your question.
Commissioner Lennon?
This is one I had to read twice, and I actually called Ms. Thurston to clarify some things, but I still have a couple. Would you mind going to the next slide? So who determines that a structure is unrelated to the farm use?
Just like any other type of land use, city staff would evaluate the activity occurring on the site. If we needed to, we would consult with legal staff to make that determination. And then, of course, any determination that's made by staff could be appealed to the Board of Adjustment if they disagree with our interpretation.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, can you go back again?
Forward or back?
Back to the, yep, that's it.
Okay.
And I guess Ms. Schaefer will speak a little bit on the temporary use permits, but that was one of the things that I asked you about. So this potentially could be a concert venue.
They could potentially have concerts and other entertainment activity on the farm without having to obtain a temporary use permit from the city.
Okay, and that would fall under the jurisdiction of who?
It would still be subject to the city's noise ordinance, which is enforced by the police department.
Okay. And then my last question is, so long-term, the current property owner decides they don't want to be in the horse farming business anymore and they decide to sell the property. This amendment still applies, right?
The next operator would, they would be able to either operate a farm as a bona fide farm, or they could redevelop it if they chose to, but it would not be exempt from zoning requirements upon redevelopment.
So that's my question. On the redevelopment option, does that become, I guess it depends, but does that become a conditional rezoning or a straight rezoning, or it depends on what that potential applicant wants to do?
So this wouldn't actually rezone the property. One of the farms is currently zoned R15, Canterbury Stables. The other is R20. Those would remain residential zoning. If someone purchased the property and they wanted to redevelop it, they would have the option of doing a straight rezoning or a conditional rezoning, but they would be subject to the city's zoning requirements unless they were going to operate as a bona fide farm over to 10 acres.
So I'm sorry to belabor this, but so the underlying zoning remains even though the bona fide farm status
That is correct.
exists? Okay. I'm good.
Got it? Commissioner Kofer?
During this agenda topic, are we able to bring you back up with questions after the applicant?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Commissioner Billings? Nothing? At this point, Catherine, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring the applicant up and hear from her.
Thank you. Amy Schaefer, I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. I know I have 5 minutes, but
I think we're flexible.
thank you. We are here tonight because my client, Wrightsville Farm and Equine, purchased this property a couple years ago. It's been a farm operating on that site since about 1969. The property had some issues. The buildings were dilapidated. It wasn't up to current standards. And so my client started working on the property, started building, updating the locker room, the barns, and the grounds. And during that process, we realized that the city code wasn't very clear on what, if anything, could be done on the farm. For instance, you know, we updated the main structure, and the county said, well, we don't issue building permits for farms, you just get an electrical permit. And so we were kind of working through those things, and we're trying to clarify that, which is why we're here today. So the current city code, 1819 on uses, section B, says that in addition to any use, change, or structure, you have to get a zoning permit, except for land for agricultural purposes. And so what does that mean? If you're a farm and you're farming, when do you come for a zoning permit? And that just really wasn't clear. So then you go to the use table and prohibited uses. There are certain agricultural uses which are prohibited throughout the city, and those are specifically listed here in this section. Bona fide farms, horse farms are not listed. They're not listed in the use table. And so those three things in conjunction just kind of cause some confusion about what can be done and can't be done on current bona fide farms in the city of Wilmington. This is the state law definition of agriculture, and as you can see, section 3 talks about the training and care of livestock. It also talks about agritourism, which is an agricultural use. And if you look at that statute that Mr. Evans mentioned, which I don't have with me, but it's 160D 903, specifies things like weddings, festivals, all those things Ms. Thurston said are agritourism, which are permitted on bona fide farms right now. So it wouldn't be expanding any kind of non-conforming use to do that. They're permitted on a farm. And so that's why we're here. We're trying to work out when you need to come before the city for a permit, what permits need to be applied for, what's a zoning regulation versus what's a county regulation. And so working with the city for about the past year or more, this is the text amendment that we came up with to do that. I don't know if that answers any of your questions, but I'm happy to answer questions, and we're available to do that.
Amy, something you just said, I want to make sure I heard it right.
Sure.
The proposed text amendment you said has been worked out jointly between you representing the applicant and the staff. Brian, do I have that correct? Or Catherine, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. The applicant has consulted with city staff on this amendment.
So both parties are in agreement with the proposed language?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Cofer.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollack. Amy, yes, you did clear up several things for me. One, certainly the definitions with regards to a bona fide farm, and that including the livestock component of horses, and second, the by right, the agro-tourism component. That's certainly definitely a big, takes away that ambiguity. To Commissioner Adams' comment, and you mentioned this earlier, in regards to some of the permits that you would be required to get, that's electrical, you mentioned, and it's for stables, barns, sheds, just no non-dwelling, non-habitable dwellings. So that is another item for clarity I thank you for.
Thank you. And this in no way, shape, or form, Mr. Adams, you asked county regulations. We can't exempt ourselves, don't exempt ourselves from any state, federal, county regulations. So as Mr. Evans said, stormwater regulations. The state has separate stormwater regulations for farms versus others. We would comply with that, and we're working with the city engineering department on what that would look like. But the second part of the text amendment does say that we would comply with all of those regulations as well.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Adams.
So that helped me, because I think about if this is a public, even if it's a temporary events type of venue, I would think that that would mean that federal standards like accessibility and the ADA would be things that your venue would have to be compliant with.
Yes, sir. Any federal, state, county requirements.
And so we have a state building code, which,
And I don't know enough about the building codes as regarding farm uses and agritourism uses to know what those are. But if they're out there, we have to comply with them, and nothing in this text amendment would change that.
okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Lennon?
So I'm a little sensitive to this whole rezoning thing over the last few months.
We're not rezoning.
I know. Can the applicant have events there now?
In our opinion, yes.
I guess, Ms. Thurston, what's the city's position on that?
City code requires a temporary use permit for special entertainment events in the residential district.
So that's a maybe?
No, we believe that our zoning ordinance does currently apply to the farm and that they would need to get a temporary use permit to have an entertainment event, like a concert out at that site.
Okay. I guess where I'm going with this is, by doing this, are we allowing those things to occur that may impact the neighbors of both of the properties in question that can't currently happen? And it doesn't sound like you all totally agree on that.
We don't. What I will say is that regardless of what happens tonight, the noise ordinance is not part of the zoning regulations, and so that would, of course, have to be complied with, as well as any other nuisance, if people are parking on the road, if trash isn't getting picked up. So all of the other city code provisions would continue to apply, regardless of the text amendment.
Ms. Thurston, have either of these properties ever applied for such a temporary permit?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I believe that Canterbury Stables applied for a permit with the police department to exceed the allowable noise level with the police department, though not city zoning.
And we were told that we couldn't get a temporary use for the property, and so we couldn't get the noise permit.
Okay. Thank you.
So I want to make sure I understand. So in today's environment, I use it, as is by right, for lack of a better term. In today's environment, they can apply for some of the things that are on the, like a concert of, whatever. They can apply for a temporary use. I think this is probably going to go back to Ms. Thurston.
Yeah. They have a question for you.
Yeah, Ms. Thurston, the question I have is, and it's kind of a follow-on to Commissioner Lennon's question. In today's environment, again, if they want to, let's use Canterbury Stables, if they want to have a concert, there is a provision today that they could apply for a temporary permit with the city?
I'm glad you asked that. That's what we were just discussing.
Okay.
No, not in the residential district. They would not be able to get a temporary use permit for a concert.
Okay, so business as usual today, that would be an exempted, that would be an event that they would not even be able to have.
That's correct.
So-
Not in a residential district.
And they're currently in a residential, they're in our code,
This one is zoned residentially, yes.
okay?
What about the other one?
The other one is zoned R20, so it is also residentially zoned.
So same situation.
Right. So for any bona fide farm, whether it's the two identified as residential or there are other ones that we're not aware of yet, the underlying zoning ordinance also applies. But if we exempt bona fide farms over 10 acres from city zoning, then they would not be subject to the requirement that they get a temporary use permit for concerts. So then it would become allowable.
Unless they discontinue operation as a bona fide farm.
Right, if they are no longer a bona fide farm, they would be subject to the entirety of our zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And North Carolina General Statute 160D 903, agricultural uses, that defines agritourism. Any activity carried out on a farm or ranch that allows members of the general public for recreation, entertainment, or educational purposes to view or enjoy rural activities, including farming, ranching, harvesting, fishing, equestrian activities, and then there are other places that talk specifically about weddings as well, as agritourism, which is part of that definition of agricultural land that I showed you. So again, we are just trying to clear this up for the property owners to know what they can do or can't do.
I'm like you, I read this twice. Yeah, okay. And I guess the thing that, I'm looking at this, my first question, Amy, is if we don't do this here tonight, then what happens? What does that do to Canterbury, or what does that do to the other stable? What happens if we do not pass this? Their operation just goes on as is?
They would be allowed to continue as non-conforming uses in the city. They would be required to get building permits through the city, temporary use permits for any events. I'm sorry, they couldn't get them on those two sites because those are residentially zoned.
Right.
But any commercial sites that would allow temporary uses, it would be.
And I think, Catherine, thank you, because you keep really kind of hit on my second question, which is, it appears that if we do not approve this tonight, then in the definition of the agritourism, is that what it's called? There will be things that, even though by state law, they're allowed to do, but in a residential, because there currently are coded, there would be things that, of that definition, that they would just not be able to do.
That's correct. The state exemptions are applicable to unincorporated areas of the county. City municipalities are allowed to regulate agricultural uses, and we do currently.
Okay. So this would, if we did not approve it, this would not prohibit them from, at least, if they wanted to have a concert, they could at least come to the city and try and get a permit.
Not the residentially zoned
Not the resident,
properties.
okay, so that still would become the overriding rule of thumb here.
That is correct, unless
Okay.
an amendment were made to that section. of the
Understand,
code.
okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Lennon?
What was the last thing you said? I'm sorry. Unless an amendment was made?
To the section of the code that regulates temporary uses.
So you'd have, I think what she's saying is,
Current code doesn't allow recreation events in residential areas.
you'd have to change the code to allow it, like a concert in a residential area. Because this is still, if we don't do anything, this is still it's residential coded.
Unless this text amendment is approved.
I'm sorry?
Unless this text amendment is.
Unless this text
Yes,
amendment
sir.
is approved.
That's the city's position, yes, sir.
Understand? Commissioner Woodruff?
I'm so confused. In the bottom of page 2, it says Canterbury has expanded usable space and has begun to host events on the site such as festivals. That's the issue?
No.
Were they told stop or anything like that, or they
No,
can't
sir.
do that?
This text amendment and these issues arose before they started hosting events. They started when we were developing and updating the property. So if we needed to rebuild a shed on site, or if they needed to add temporary stables for the horses.
I understand all it's this festival thing. It's got
Yeah.
me hung up. In your mind, I assume you don't, that was fine. We're going to do a festival, but per what it sounds to me like.
A bona fide farm can do agritourism.
The city's saying you shouldn't have done that without a permit.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Adams, anything? Commissioner Goins? Commissioner Kofer? Oh, you do, I'm sorry.
Sorry. What is the zoning of Airlie Gardens, since it's pretty close to both these properties and it does do concerts? I'd be interested to know that.
Is that a question to the applicant or to the city, the staff?
Just as a comparison.
Yeah.
Very similar site.
Gentlemen, if y'all could please speak into your microphones. We have to remember that we have captioners that are listening through the system, and they can't hear when you're not speaking into the microphone. Thank you.
Airlie Gardens is also zoned R20 Legacy District. It is owned by New Hanover County. It's part of the parks system. So
Okay.
it's already not subject to.
So as an exemption. Understood.
Anyone else? Commissioner Kofer.
I mean, I'm a little like Commissioner Woodruff. I really thought that I had my head wrapped around this, and now I'm confused. I feel like we're talking about two separate concerns. One are the building permit process, the permitting process for structures, and then we're talking about uses, right? So, and then I'm kind of reading between the lines that both parties agree, the applicant and the city, because of the staff's recommendation is approval, that this is the best path forward. I guess where some of the confusion's coming is, what can we do today? The applicant feels legally by right that the agro-tourism component includes weddings, the ranch experience, the barn experience, which includes concerts, perhaps. I don't know where concerts comes from, with a wedding, festival.
We had a wedding on site.
Had a wedding on
recently.
site.
Yes.
With music, live band.
I'm not sure if it was a live band or a DJ, but yeah, there was music on site. And we did request the noise permit, and we're told that you can't have a noise permit because you can't have a temporary. But that came after years of working on this text amendment.
So let's stop this, so just so we know where we stand today.
Sure.
Just hypothetically, we'll play that out for a minute. So you guys, the property owner has a wedding on their farm, and they want to have a band, so they need to ask permission to have that. And did the city deny that?
It's my understanding that you did.
We did.
Okay, fair enough, no
The
problem.
noise permit.
Noise permit was denied because that's where we have a divide in the path, that the city says we can't do this, the applicant. Do you feel, Amy, by right, you should be able to do that without asking permission?
We do.
Okay, so we're trying to clear that up.
We are.
And the city is in favor of this amendment, and the applicant's happy with this amendment. Now we have to consider the neighbors in the residential zone, as Commissioner Lennon brought up, the public welfare and well-being.
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm straight now. We've got that piece to think about.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Lennon.
Yeah, and I know this is probably a little bit different, but it is, if I'm just being honest, I'm more worried about the other site than I am this site, just because of where it is and what it is. And Airlie Road is actually one of the very few roads in the state of North Carolina with no right-of-way. So I'm just trying to envision garden party, after party.
I hate to bring them into this. I don't know anything about
I know,
their
and I'm not- I'm
farm,
just-
but it's included, and we have to consider it because the
That's-
text amendment is citywide, absolutely. I will say, I don't know that there's ever been calls to the site or problems for noise ordinances. I don't know that anything we do today would make her change the way she operates her farm or business.
And I don't mean to imply that she would,
But
she could.
but she could.
But she could.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I guess, I don't know the appropriateness of this, so somebody stop me if I go off the rails, but, I mean, I see the benefits to this, but I think, is there any way to address the city's concern about the noise side of it and get this accomplished also?
Yeah, sure. And again, I think we're still subject to the noise ordinance. To me, and the city might have a different take on it, but, you know, if somebody calls the cops and they come out there and we're in violation of the noise ordinance, one way or the other, we're going to get cited. So the only difference is they don't get advance notice from a permit request.
So let me rephrase, to avoid having the cops come out, if
Sure.
there were some parameters.
Oh, they'd come anyway.
Right, but if there's some parameters of, so your client knows, the other property owner knows, should she ever choose to do something
Sure.
like that?
We could take this back and, look and see if there's something with another section of the code, the noise ordinance. I'm not as familiar with the noise ordinance. I don't deal with that much in the rezoning context, other than to say we have to comply. But it's definitely something if that's a concern of the board, we could take a look at.
Well, I'm just speaking for myself at this point. I mean, like I said, generally, I'm in favor of this, but that is a part of it, and just full transparency, I'm more worried about the other site, like I said, because there are residential neighborhoods around both, but I think Airlie Road is just not built to, think about the after party of the garden party, and Airlie Road's like insane, so that would be a concern.
Fair enough, John, because it has far-reaching implications, even though it's only 2 sites that we can see today, but, it certainly covers both. And I don't think I've been on this board before where we had a situation where we didn't have a very clear-cut what is allowed today without asking any permission. What can you do? And right now, we have 2 opinions of what this owner can do. The city has a state position and the applicant has a position. And so I'm kind of curious on Mr. Evans, is this, when we go into this agro-tourism component and not knowing what the noise ordinance looks like, is there any more color you can share here?
What Ms. Schaefer said is correct. It's also my understanding of the statute. If this zoning amendment went through, a bona fide farm would fall under that statutory definition, which includes the agritourism, and it outlines those uses, which would be, permissible under state law, and the city would be falling in line with that. Just to kind of go back to the previous question, I think it was from Mr. Lennon. We could look at the noise ordinance, but that's not something that would come back before this board. It's in a different part of the city code. It's not in the land development code. So that's sort of the backstop to this is, yes, that definition of agritourism would allow these uses, but the backstop is the city has the noise ordinance, which would still be applicable throughout the city, which Ms. Schaefer also described during her presentation.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One more time, it's the 3rd time I've done this tonight. Will you say the last part again about the noise ordinance?
Remember what the last part was. The noise ordinance is not part of the land development code. It's in a different article of the city code. So the land development code is Article 18. All changes to the land development code come to the Planning Commission first for your consideration and then go on to City Council. Amendments to other parts of the code don't come here. There would just be a council-only consideration. So it's not something that we could bring back to this board per se for a recommendation to council, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to confuse it, but
No, let me put now, so I'll do number 4 for you.
Okay.
Okay. Let me play back what you just said, make sure I have it right. Because this thing has gone from, I thought, simple to a lot of gray parts. And we still have a public hearing that we want to, enjoy the interaction. What you just said is, if this passes, the existing noise ordinance will still be in effect, and it's just they would not have, the applicant's customer would not have to go apply for a permit but the ordinance would still be in effect from if they're violating the city ordinance on noise, they would still be subject to being cited.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The only thing I'd add to that, I apologize, might be slightly beyond the scope of your question, Mr. Lennon, but in order to be eligible to be exempt from Chapter 18, which is the Land Development Code, it's prerequisite that you have to meet that size restriction, which is 10 acres. And in addition to that, you have to comply with one of those other guidelines that's in there. You have to have some kind of certification which shows that you're a bona fide farm, a legitimate agricultural use. So you've got to have that certification. That's not something that this city can issue. It's something that's issued by another government body. That'd be federal authorities, a tax form, I think it's a Schedule F, a forestry plan, which comes from the state of North Carolina, or other agencies. It's not something that the city would have any power to bestow, but in order for us to be able to determine what is or is not a bona fide farm, we needed to have some kind of metric to link it to. So there's the size, and then you have to be able to demonstrate one of those other qualifications, showing that you're a farming or agricultural use of some sort.
I appreciate that, and Ms. Thurston covered that when I talked to her a week or two ago. Okay.
Good.
Can understand they could get a ticket.
Absolutely.
Amy, which of these A through E are you qualifying as?
We have a USDA certified farm exemption. We also have the sales tax farm exemption. The present use value program has a couple different hoops you have to jump through, including length of ownership.
Any other questions for the applicant? Amy, you can take a seat for a minute.
Thank you.
I'd now like to open the public hearing, and I would like to start with, is there anybody here that would like to speak in favor of this amendment? Is there anybody present that would like to speak against this amendment, this proposal, excuse me? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of the commission.
Now I'm still confused. But it seems to me the city's saying they can't permit whatever the request may be because it's residential. Amy's not saying we wouldn't do a permit, but it does no good because the city says we can't take it. So I'm trying to figure out how do we, I don't know the mechanics of just how do you have it so that a permit's required for them to do any festival they want to do. And right now it's being denied just because of the wording. You can't do it in a residential. So I don't know, is there a zoning you can change the bona fide farm to, non-residential? So it then would be allowed to get a permit and whatever permit gives
So
them.
change it from an R whatever to something else.
Whatever, I don't know. Or some going from the other side, well, I don't know which side it would take to come from, but something that would allow a permitting process to take place. It's there and it's got a purpose, but it can't be done because it's deemed non-residential. Just a thought.
Commissioner Adams.
I'll jump in here too. It sounds like we are all talking about rectifying what's permissible, but with some set of guide rails, right? Is what I think, that's what I'm hearing and understanding we're trying to accomplish. Because a total exemption of, now that I understand the difference between, what we're really talking about is uses as opposed to building, I think kind of we dug into the real issue here. If there was a festival that had 5,000 people that you wanted to have on this versus 50 for a wedding, but you didn't have to submit for a permit for either one of those, to me, that starts to be a breakdown in kind of reasonable guardrails, right? And there might be more than 5,000 people the day after the garden party. So I think, me personally, I'm on board with trying to allow what's the intended use for permitted uses But I think we still need to have some level of safeguards and guardrails around the uses as opposed to the building and the permitting.
So it sounds like we
Yeah,
might
go
have
ahead.
some more work to do. If I may, then perhaps it would be best if the board could give us any comments today that you have, questions, concerns, and we can go back and work some more on this, if that's acceptable.
Well, I think, you know, to address that, you have access to what's being said here tonight, so that should help you with that. I mean, obviously,
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Just if anybody else who hasn't spoken has some
Yeah.
specific concerns that we could address, we're happy to do that.
Amy, I
Commissioner Gofer, go ahead.
appreciate that opportunity to share those sentiments, and yes, I mean, it seems ambiguous if you consider the planning commission to address rehearsal before the big show in front of the city council, then it seems, you know, I think everyone would agree in the room that we need to iron more out to streamline it, make it more efficient in front of those elected officials, but, you know, I don't know where the buck stops with, you know, the use component. I still feel a little confused based on the two interpretations of the law as it comes down, I guess, from the state with bona fide farms, what you can and can't do. It's just, it's not clear and clean cut here. With the noise component, I think that you know, as Commissioner Adams has pointed out, there does need to be some guardrails in regards to regulation. I mean, no offense to everybody sitting in the room, but I'm a fan of less government, but at the same time, you know, we have sworn an oath to protect the neighbors and the public welfare and well-being, and you know, what that looks like, I don't know. I don't assume anything's gonna be too crazy, but I mean, if you were to get 6 noise violations in a period of 6 months, I would think somebody needs to come back in front of some board somewhere. So those are my comments.
and to pick up on that, I'd like for us to try and get it right, as close to right as we can, you know, to prevent that kind of thing from happening. So, Mr. Lennon.
Well, Commissioner Adams coined the phrase, and then you copycatted it, so I'll use it again, which is the guardrails. I thought that was a good, where I personally fall out is I think it's a good idea. It clears up some ambiguity for these properties, but I do think the guardrails are relevant because whether it's your client or a subsequent owner that maintains that farm status, I think everyone will admit there's a difference between, I'll pick 2,000 people showing up to a wedding off Wrightsville Avenue versus 150. And I'm not picking on numbers, but just the impact to the other citizens.
Yeah, and I get this is an applicant-initiated text amendment, but again, I only represent one person, so we do have to consider all of the other properties, and so I understand and thank you for that.
Absolutely, and the last thing I'll say is that Mr. Evans made a comment about, I'm not saying that I want me personally, want noise elements or controls. To me, this is kind of changing the use because we're clearing up a question for your client, at least, as to what can and can't happen there without the city's blessing for each and every event. So to me, that is kind of a use change. So that's how I look at it. And it's difficult for me to support that, understanding what the ramifications of that use change might be without some guardrails.
Let me offer something before I ask for a vote of the commission. Would it make sense, based on what you've heard, from all of us, would it make sense for you to look to a continuance?
Yes, sir. That would be our request at this time, so that, as Mr. Kofer said, and all of you, we can get it right now before we move on to a different set of faces in front of us on the dais.
I mean, there's kind of an overwhelming, overarching theme that says we all kind of want to get to yes, whatever that is, which is really a euphemism for the right answer, whatever that is. I don't feel like we're there as a commission. I mean, based on everything you've heard. So
Yeah.
you know, if
If
you're.
it's not clear, we'll just be back here again in the future.
I understand,
So,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So, are you asking for a continuance?
Yes, sir. At this time, the applicant would request a continuance. I think your next meeting should be sufficient. When is?
It's in January,
January the 10th.
January
Thank
10th.
you. Which is coming up. I just wasn't sure with the holiday.
Okay. So I guess the applicant is, keep me honest, you know, Mr. Legal Counsel, applicant has made a request. I'll take it as a request for a continuance. So all we need to do as a commission is just vote yea or nay to accept that, correct?
That
Yeah,
would be correct. That would,
Yeah. So we have a request on the table.
I make a motion that we accept a request for continuance to this applicant, and for their suggestion, it be put back on the January 10 agenda.
Second.
Have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Next item is, the next item of business is just other business. From the commission, there's a note on the agenda that everybody has seen relative to calendar of meetings, and we'll take that from the staff in a minute. But the what I'll call the organizational meeting, which is chair and vice chair election, that will happen in the January meeting on the 10th, okay? So just as a point of information, so I guess let me go to any other items from the commission. Okay? Go to the staff.
Just wanted to report that the applications you considered at your October meeting were both approved by the City Council. So that was the general rezoning for Peachtree and Park and the LDC amendment package primarily related to UMX and the CBD. I'd also like to introduce, or actually just announce, that Pat is our new senior planner for plan review. So you'll be seeing more of him than you have in the past. And also want to congratulate Nicole Smith. She is the city's new strategic planning manager. So she has taken on a different role with the city, so you will not be seeing Nicole anymore. And I think Travis has been here, but if not, we also have Travis Henley, who is our senior planner for comprehensive planning and urban design.
Okay.
And with that, I believe you need to vote on your calendar.
Anything else? Two things that I just wanted to add was, one is I'm sorry, Catherine, did you? Okay, Brian.
We will need you to vote on that calendar.
Okay. All right. So and thank you, Brian. Thank you, John. You all got in your package the list of calendar dates for next year. So we need to vote to accept those. So I need a motion to
I'd like to make a motion to accept the proposed council or commission meeting dates for 2024.
Second.
a second to accept the calendar dates. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Relative to calendar dates, so I did ask Amy to, for point of information is to get to us over the next couple weeks or so the calendar dates that City Council has approved for their calendar, just as a point of information for everybody. Okay. I just want a couple things. One is this will be the last time we're together for the month of December, so I want to wish everybody an upcoming, happy holiday season for yourself and your families. Give you a chance to relax, and those that choose to take it, please take it. The other thing I would say is just a reminder that City Council met last night. They had their organizational meeting, swore in the new City Council members, and I know that's a recorded meeting, so point of interest, if that's of interest to anybody, I'd recommend taking a look at it, because they were, the outgoing council members, very magnanimous and deserving of, the kind words and accolades that they were given. So, and welcome the new city council members as well. So without any further ado, seeing nothing from anyone, I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned, and have a nice holiday.